Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We're those friends that you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility. Hey there, welcome back to the Springs in the Desert podcast. I am Jillian, your host, and today's episode is for a particular group of people. Today we're going to talk about NFP Awareness Week from the perspective of Springs in the Desert for those walking on the path of infertility and loss. So if you happen to be someone or you know someone who is an NFP instructor, or perhaps you work at the diocesan level in marriage and family life or respect life, or maybe you are in a marriage prep team at the parish level or the diocesan level, this conversation is for you. If it isn't for you, if you aren't in one of those groups of people, I would encourage you to forward this to someone you know who is in one of those spots, or just to sit tight and join us, because we are all about walking with those who are on the path of infertility and loss. And I hope this episode would be a warm hug to you as well. So for those who are in the capacity of serving those who are interested in NFP or learning NFP, who are practicing NFP, the Springs in the Desert team has created a resource just for you. And so the first thing that you can do is go to www.springsinthedesert.org, and there will be a pop-up. It is for NFP Awareness Week. It's a PDF guide to accompanying NFP clients on the path of infertility. Now, sometimes it is the case that couples will know that they might struggle with infertility or might struggle to conceive due to a diagnosis that they've received prior to maybe even engagement or during engagement. Others may not know. Either way, 1 in 5 couples do struggle with this. And so it's important that you, as you are serving in the capacity that God has called you to at the diocesan or parish level, or meeting with individual clients and teaching them NFP and instructing on whatever method it is that you're called to, it's important that you know some things that might be helpful for those who are struggling. And we don't want you to have to try to research and recreate the wheel because we have support for you. So if you go to our website, there will be a pop-up, and you just have to simply input your email. And with that email, we will make sure to send you resources, helpful resources throughout the year. For instance, this last week, we sent out an email with a flipbook guide that I'm going to talk to you about today. But we send resources throughout the year that help you serve in the capacity that you have been called to. And we're here to walk with you as well as you are walking with couples who might be in this situation. So once you put in your email on our website in the pop-up, there'll be a free download. Just click to get your download and it'll pop right up on your screen. And I just want to talk to you a little bit about how it is, how it's structured. We have some internal struggles, kind of the impact internally on a couple, and external struggles. And we're going to start a little bit internally. That infertility, number one, is that infertility can be an emotional roller coaster. There's a lot of emotions, and couples experience this at different times, in different ways, and it ebbs and flows, right? Grief is not linear, and there isn't sort of a start and end date. And so it's just important to know that there's a lot of emotional complexities that happen on this path. The second piece is regarding identity. When we have a desire in our heart that isn't fulfilled, that can impact our identity and who we believe as a son or daughter of God and what He has called us to do, it can be hard to wrestle with that. And so knowing that the desire to conceive, the use of NFP, all of these conversations can really be pivotal to how a couple is experiencing who they are and who God has created them to be and what it means to be a daughter or son of God. Next, another internal struggle is about medical interventions and how, right, God has given us medicine and our bodies and biology, which is so beautiful and so important. When we focus, when the focus is so much on the physical, it can become burnout for a couple. So to just encourage you to kind of include questions about how they're doing in a holistic fashion. How are they sleeping? Do they feel like it might be time to pause maybe this method or maybe come back to this next month? Or is there maybe a different method that wouldn't feel maybe so overwhelming to them? Just to kind of check in on them, not just, of course, how NFP is going and how their charting is going, but how they're doing overall and in general. The next piece is where intimacy can become challenging. When the focus, right, this desire is so good to have a child, and when the focus is on conception, right, we can unconsciously objectify our spouse or even the hopeful child, because there's a hyper focus, right, on conception. And so the intimacy can become a little bit more mechanic as opposed to organic and a loving embrace. And so to just encourage couples to really live in and live out a life of intimacy, and to focus on each other and the beauty that they are as a family of two. And then the final internal kind of struggle that I would like to point out that our team talks about is sort of a spiritual desert, right? When we are, right, God says, knock and the door will be opened, ask and you shall receive. And when there's kind of a friction between what we're asking for and what God is giving us, it can be really challenging to continue to come to the Lord. It can be hard to share that with our spiritual director or our spouse, to bring it to prayer and to ask God, what are you doing here? And what fruit are you bringing from my marriage? And what good are you calling me to? Because of course we know that he is, and he is always good, and he is working all things together for our good. But it can be challenging to hold both of those realities, that he is so good, but also we have unanswered prayers. And so to just make sure that you are tapping into that as well, and how they're doing spiritually would be really helpful, especially for those who are struggling to conceive. I want to kind of switch gears here to some external influences that we talk about in our flip book, which again, if you missed it at the beginning, is available on our website, www.springsinthedesert.org. Or you can email us at info@springsinthedesert.org, and we would be happy to connect with you and provide you this flipbook and any other resources that you might be looking for. So again, switching gears to some external influences. Of course, infertility affects the couple, but the effects, the emotional effects, the relational effects go far beyond their marriage. It's family, friends. It can be the workplace. It can be even strangers, right? Or our friends in the pews next to us who maybe unintentionally ask questions or have expectations, or maybe even out of good intentions exclude couples from events because they maybe are trying to protect them from, maybe a gathering with a lot of children. And it can be hard to navigate that. And so those relationships and developing them and approaching them with sensitivity is something that they might be navigating and trying to figure out in this season. Just to dive a little bit deeper into that, the intrusive questions or the assumptions, sometimes those are actually those assumptions or expectations are our own, and those are more of an internal. But often we find in this community, a lot of our community members share that they get asked questions, and this could be at the grocery store, it could be at church, it can be, at our holiday gatherings. It can be really challenging to navigate those conversations when they perhaps shouldn't have been. Maybe those questions should have been asked in the first place, or maybe they had good intentions. They didn't realize maybe what the couple was struggling with, but can be intrusive and hurtful. And so coming up with ways to explain kind of where they're at with their infertility journey with as much or as little as they would like to share, coming up with phrases like, we're working on growing our family. Would you pray for us? Sort of these sort of one-line responses that would help a couple to share, like I said, as much or as little as they want to about maybe the difficulty that they're having, and inviting others to realize that there might be a reality beyond what they can see. Another external struggle is that when we do share our story, when those who share their struggle with infertility, they often are met with a very quick jump to solutions, sort of a litany of ways that they can fix their situation, a way to find a solution to this. And these two can be almost as hurtful or as difficult to navigate as the assumptions from, have you tried this prayer, to have you tried this treatment, or why don't you just adopt? These are all really, all of those situations may have been part of someone else's journey, and are likely already part of on the hearts and part of the discernment of this couple. And so again, the confidence in what God is calling them to is something that they are hoping to live out, and not to have to find solutions to the quote unquote problem, that they might be able to really just grow in relationship with others who are walking next to them and supporting them as they are kind of discerning, what treatments are next, or what method maybe they are choosing, or maybe joining them in, a prayer if that is what they have asked, but not to provide a quick fix for the sorrow that they are having. Another external pressure is sometimes a pressure from not necessarily that maybe the instructor, the professional, maybe the provider is explicitly doing this, but when there is, again, that focus on the physical, on the desire, to conceive, on figuring out maybe what's preventing conception and what's happening there, it can be kind of a hyperfixation on doing everything exactly right, that if they don't, they missed a day of the supplement, or if they didn't chart every day, or if they didn't stay on the diet that they had all weekend, that there becomes kind of this pressure that's built around achieving, quote unquote, right? That if they don't do everything exactly right, that God won't work in and through them, which can be really, really challenging. And then finally, there are, it's sort of along with the solutions, but the sort of unhelpful advice that can come along the way, that in an effort, right, the body of Christ wants to help each other and lift each other up. And sometimes there is unsolicited advice. And so really these external factors, it's really helpful to have tools in their toolbox, in their back pocket, to be able to be confident and use, and to be united as a couple to respond to any of those suggestions or advice or remarks about the size of their family or the challenge that they are having. I want to kind of jump into a different topic. So we just covered internal and external struggles for those who are on the path of infertility or loss. Of course, loss has potentially a second kind of grieving pattern there. Both of those paths are complex. But what we really like to focus on here at Springs is language. And language really does matter. And so in the flip book, we have a whole section on language. And I'm just going to chat about a few of them because it explains it much more in depth and gives examples. But one of them is that we here at Springs don't label anyone as infertile. Infertile sort of connects more to the identity of who someone is. And while infertile, of course, is a good adjective for a period, the infertile period of a woman's cycle, to label a couple as infertile, it sort of replaces some of the words of their identity. And so the way that we speak about a couple is someone who's experiencing infertility, someone who's walking the path of infertility, navigating infertility. And that slight change can be helpful to someone who is struggling and walking on this path. Another word, the two, I guess, that kind of go hand in hand are the achieve and avoid. Achieve, although of course, right, that you have achieved pregnancy, the word in itself is not a negative word. But if someone doesn't achieve, the conclusion is that they have failed something. And so just to be mindful of that word and how a couple might be processing that, and that, right, the goal is to conceive, that they are trying to conceive. And if they have difficulty, doesn't mean that they have failed in any way. And avoid, a note to, sometimes avoid gives a negative connotation to pregnancy itself. And so, especially for those who are really in a position trying to conceive. And so finding ways to word that a little bit more positively that might reinforce the couple's discernment of the good of the child rather than an obstacle or a disruption might be helpful. or even the word postponing might be helpful for someone who is feeling kind of frustrated about this dynamic of achieving and avoiding. We can be mindful of our words and be able to help each other kind of process and grieve along this path. The last section within this flip book that I hope you check out is regarding triggers and support and encouragement. I've already mentioned a few of the ways that encouragement can help, but there are triggers along the way. The chart itself might be a trigger for someone who is learning NFP. And so to be present to them, to listen to them, to, sort of just be there in the hard, in the discomfort, in the frustration, and also in the joys, because we all need help sometimes. And to also remind them, kind of keep an eye on the fact that our lives are not just about our fertility. And although that is a really beautiful good that God has given us, that their marriage today, to affirm their marriage today is good and beautiful and bringing life, and that their family is a family, whether it's a family of 2 or 3 or more, that they are a family on the day that they were married, and that the pursuit of health is such a good endeavor. And it's also okay to not be the only endeavor or the central endeavor of their life. And so to just really affirm them and to stand with them in that. So if you have stuck around for this episode, thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful for the work that you are doing. If you are someone who is working with couples who are learning about NFP or practicing NFP, if you are working at the diocesan level or right with couples, we are praying for you, and we're so grateful for your yes to God's call. And we just want to walk alongside you as you serve those who might know someone who has infertility, who might be struggling with infertility that they know of already, or they might deal with that in the future. And we're here to support you, to walk alongside you. And we have this really great resource that we'd love to get into your hands. So again, please check out our website, www.springsinthedesert.org, and info@springsinthedesert.org. Thank you so much for being here. And we're praying for your mission. God bless. Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. We would be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review us so that we can reach more listeners. Don't forget to check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and community prayer list, read our blog, and register for virtual and in-person events. Most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.